Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel, and hi if you're new here, I'm Jade and it is time for my monthly wrap up. So we're going to go through all the books I read in June. Overall I had a really good month. I generally stayed quite good on my TBR and I read a total of 11 books this month, which I thought was pretty good. And some of them were quite beefy as well, so I feel quite proud of myself, especially because it's been a really busy month for me. I have been doing the 75 hard challenge. If you don't know what that is, I will have a video coming about that once I've completed it. I do think that's helped to sort of motivate me and keep me moving through all my books, so I think that's partly why I'm doing so well this month. There is only one book from my TBR jar which I did not get around to reading, but I had all of my ones from May carrying over. So I basically had 6 TBR jar choices, as well as my book club reads, as well as a few things I just wanted to read. And I'm also not ARC reading. I am beta reading for 2 people as well. So I've been trying to get a bit of that done. I've been a bit slow for them as well. Things have been chaotic. We've had lots of storms. And as a result of being busy, I am filming this in the evening. So I've kind of angled myself a little bit so I'm not directly across from the window, because I'm having to let some natural light in to sort of help with the lighting situation. But if I directly face it, the reflection in my glasses annoys me as that bad. However, without further ado, let me show you what I've read this month, because there are some good ones. So the first book I read was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is the first book by her that I've ever read, and I loved it, if you can't tell by my 5-star rating. I just think the way this was written, I really fell in love with the characters. I thought it was quite an interesting idea and concept. But basically we follow a girl called Clementine, and she has her aunt pass away, sadly, and moves into her aunt's old apartment. Now she is aware that her aunt claims that her apartment is kind of magical. It allows people to sort of transport in time, and it takes them back 7 years. So then at some point, Clementine suddenly finds herself in her aunt's apartment and everything's back to the way it was, and there is a strange man living there. Turns out that 7 years in the past, her aunt had allowed her friend's son to stay there. So she obviously meets this guy, and it's a little bit of a rom-com between the two, but the time keeps switching. So like, Clementine can't control this. She'll enter and it'll be 7 years in the past, and then she'll enter and it'll be present day and he's no longer there. And she's trying to navigate sort of falling for someone who isn't part of her current life, and whether she can integrate that. Because, you know, it's only 7 years later, she has the possibility of finding him. So it sort of plays in and how their paths cross in the current timeline. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this plot. I thought the way it was written was really endearing. Yeah, I just loved it, okay? There's not much more to say. If you like your rom-coms, give this a go. And then the next book I picked up was How to Read a Book by Monica Wood. I honestly didn't know what to expect from this one. I didn't know a lot about it. I just kind of, honestly, if a book has book or library or something in the title, it just captures my attention and I kind of want to read it, I'm not gonna lie. But I did know this was about 3 people that supposedly will meet in a bookstore and their lives sort of intertwine, but actually their lives are already intertwined and then they come back together in a bookstore. So it was a little bit different to what I was expecting. So one of the characters we follow is Harriet. She's a volunteer at a local prison running a book club. And then we have Violet, who has just got out of prison. She killed someone, that's why she was there, and she was part of the book club in prison, so that's how she knew Harriet. And then we have Frank, who happens to work in a bookstore and is the husband of the person that Violet killed. I do just want to say, Violet didn't mean to kill this person, okay? And essentially, they all meet again in this bookstore, and it's about them sort of finding forgiveness for themselves, each other, and sort of going on a bit of a journey. I don't know how realistic it is, because I do think that the way their paths cross and their forgiveness is maybe a little bit too easy at certain points, but I do kind of like that it has a sort of edge of realness to it. There is definitely some very deep emotions that come through, and there's a lot of sort of backstory, which does make the whole plot sort of make sense by the end. It sort of ends up as one of those sort of like feel-good stories with some morals to it. So I definitely think it's worth a read. It's a clever book. My only complaint, and the reason I've only given it 4.25, obviously still very good, I say only, I still loved it. The reason I've only given it 4.25 is I just feel like it needed more. It just felt very short. I felt like I didn't really get to know the characters as much as I'd have liked. I feel like if I could have known the characters a little bit deeper, then I would have cared even more for the outcome. That's my only issue with it. I think it could have done with a little bit more. It's not the longest of books. It's 273 pages, and when you're following 3 characters, I just feel like, you know, we didn't even get 100 pages on each character. And I just felt like I could have got to know them a little bit more. But like I said, Still enjoyed it, still recommend the book. So the next book I then picked up was an ARC that I was kindly gifted by the author. And this actually comes out on the 23rd of July. So if it sounds like your kind of thing, it's out very, very soon. And as you can tell by my 4.5 star rating, I thought it was a really good book. I really enjoyed this. Most of the things I didn't see coming. I guess a little bit of some of the sort of like surprises in the mystery side of the thriller. But there were other twists that then sort of changed it a little. But essentially, I describe this as Desperate Housewives meets Frida McFadden. Like, honestly, it's a little bit soap opera-y because it's all set around this like neighborhood and neighbors. So it just kind of feels a little bit like a drama and a little bit cheesy with that, but in the best of ways, because I mean, Desperate Housewives was such a great show. Like, I loved that show. So if you like Desperate Housewives, I feel like, you know, and you like thrillers, this is a good one. But this is essentially a multi-POV. We follow Josh and Sophia at first. They move into a new house on the neighborhood. They're wanting a fresh start. And then they have these neighbors, Brian and Hannah, and they just always seem to be watching. And like on the surface, the neighborhood seems really safe, but there's clearly something not quite right there. And honestly, there is lots of lies, murder, deceit, disappearances of people. Like, there is a lot packed into this book. Like I said, it is really Desperate Housewives meets Frida McFadden because it's very well written in terms of it's easy to absorb into. That's what I love about Frida McFadden is I can just pick up her book and it just absorbs me in very quickly. There's nothing too complex, but it still kind of gives me something to work out and guess. I think this does it a little bit better than some of the Frida McFadden books I've read. I feel like I was guessing a little bit more here, but it's also just very easy to get into. So yeah, if you enjoy your kind of soap operas mixed with some thriller elements, definitely go and try this one when it comes out on July 23rd. I know I left the plot a little bit vague on that one, but honestly, there are so many like twists and turns and random links between characters, etc., that I can't say too much without giving certain things away. I feel like you just need to go and read it. Then next, I read Daggermouth. So this was actually technically an ARC for me. The publisher recently sent me a digital copy, even though I believe the book's already out, but I think it was to promote that we are getting actually a hardcover sprayed edge edition, which is really cool. I wish they could have sent that to me, but it's okay. I got the digital version for free, so I am not complaining because I love the book, if you can't tell by the 5-star rating. It is a book I'd heard a lot about and kind of wanted to pick up anyway, so I felt really grateful that I got given it to read. And what I loved the most before I even get into the plot about this is there are very many twists and turns in this novel where the characters are quite complex and it's actually really hard to know like who to trust and whether they're genuine characters. Like it's actually really interesting how it all plays out. So we mainly follow two characters called Shadera and Grayson, and essentially this sort of world that it's set in is sort of split into two sections. We have the heart and then we have the boundary. The heart is where the president lives and everyone lives a bit nicer. The boundary is definitely sort of like, you know, the slums kind of idea. And within the boundary, there are this group of sort of like rebel assassins, I guess you could say, called Daggermouth. And Shadera is a member of Daggermouth and she is sent to kill Grayson, who is the president's son. So he is the president of the Heart's son, and he's also the executioner, so he has the job of killing anyone who breaks the law. So obviously it seems they're enemies, they're on opposing sides, however their lives sort of get thrown together, and being in this sort of forced proximity together, maybe they start to realize they're more similar than they think. That's honestly about as much as I can say without giving anything away, but it is definitely, it's sort of enemies to lovers vibes with a bit of forced proximity for sure. Really good. Really absorbed me. I was addicted to this book, honestly. Like, if you like your sort of fantasy dystopian worlds, go and read this. It's so good. And the sprayed edge edition that's coming out is beautiful, so I'm definitely going to be getting it. Oh, and just a last little note on it. It is going to be a duology, and it does end in a horrible way where you can't wait for the second book. Just a warning. So if you hate that, maybe wait until the duology is out next year, like the second part of it. But if you can wait, I still recommend this book so much. And then my next read was To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. And if you've been following me, you'll know I almost got rid of this. I almost unhauled it without reading it. And as you can probably tell by my 3.75 star rating, I'm actually glad that I kept and read it. Yes, it's not like my favorite book, especially this month. I've just had such a strong month, but I did really enjoy it overall. It's a little YA for me, but way better than the Samurai Temporary series. It is written so much better. Honestly, I really didn't like the Samurai Temporary. I think I only enjoyed that because I loved the show so much, so I could kind of follow it and the characters, but this one's definitely written better, and I need to go watch the movie for this one now. So this book follows a character called Lara Jean. I really appreciate that it is just a singular POV here because I do love all the dual POVs, but I just feel like it's so overdone now that sometimes it's just refreshing to get something from a singular POV, I'm not gonna lie. So yes, this book follows Lara Jean, and she is a teenager at high school, and when she was younger, she wrote love letters to boys that she sort of had a crush on. But one day, these seem to get leaked and posted to these boys, and now they're all like, like obviously confronting her about this. So it makes her life quite dramatic, and she has a crush on her sister's ex-boyfriend, their neighbour, which makes things very weird and awkward. So she has to navigate her feelings for this neighbour, who is her sister's ex-boyfriend. Her sister's away, abroad, studying abroad. But at the same time, she ends up fake dating a boy from school who's very popular. So it sort of starts changing her life around a little bit, and it gets very dramatic. It is your kind of stereotypical high school type story, I will say, but I did really enjoy it. And even though, yes, for right now it's not outstanding for me, like I said, it's a little YA, I know that if I had read this as a teenager, I would have loved it. So I'm still glad that I have read it and that I didn't just throw this on the I expect it to be bad pile, just like the Summer I Turned Pretty. This is way better. So if you do like your kind of YA school-based rom-com type books, you're gonna like this one, I think. Then the next book I picked up was The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song, which was one of my book club's picks for the month, and it was actually my pick. So in this particular book club, those of us that go most regularly had the choice of one of our books for each month, and this was my month, and I chose this one because, well, it was on my TBR, and I knew a couple of other people already had it on their TBR from my book club as well. So to me, it made like a logical choice. And I also haven't really read many retellings apart from the Labyrinth ones. We won't go there. So I thought this would be fun. This is a Mulan retelling for those that don't know. And in this Mulan retelling, our main character is Mei Lin, and she ends up joining the army. But however, rather than to save her father, like in the Disney version of Mulan, she ends up joining the army. Mei Lin ends up joining the army to escape marriage to a very horrible, nasty man. So she disguises herself as a man, joins the army, just like in the Disney version. She starts getting close to a lot of people there, particularly one of the princes who is sort of leading the squadron she's in. However, she does have a little bit of a secret after inheriting her late mother's necklace. And there is a magic element to this. So a little bit different from the Disney version of Mulan. There is magic in this one, which I thought was quite a nice, I say addition, but it is based on like an older tale. So the Disney one is not the original story of Mulan. I just feel it's the one most people know. So therefore it's easy to make the comparison for you. But essentially this necklace gives her some kind of power, and maybe, just maybe, she is the one that's going to be needed to save the kingdom from this sort of civil war type thing that is going on. However, who can she trust? That's what I will say. Who can she trust? There's a lot of twists in this book. The end ends on such a kind of cliffhanger. I can't wait to get the second book, but I am currently on a book buying ban, so I can't buy that yet. But I will definitely be getting it as soon as my book ban is lifted. I am being really good and sticking to things this time, but yeah, I need the second part. And what's really interesting is KX Song did talk about the original Mulan sort of myth and story, and she explained that there's usually like 2 different versions, and she sort of took inspiration from them. They are very dark. So this is definitely a darker version of Mulan than the Disney version. And apparently that's how the original tales go. They are quite dark and they have different endings. And KX Song explains all this in the back of the book, so I don't want to like give all that away either. I think it's quite an interesting little read at the end. But if you enjoy retellings, if you like Mulan, I definitely say give this a go. I really enjoyed it. Only reason I haven't given it 5 stars is because it just took a moment to get into certain areas of the book. But once I did, I loved it. Then next I picked up The Women by Kristin Hannah. Finally. This has been on my TBR for too long. I mean, I bought it not long after it came out because it was a book that I kept seeing everywhere, and I really like other Kristin Hannah novels. But yes, I've only just got around to this one because my TBR jar picked it for this month. And if you can't tell, I love this one too, which I kind of expected to. I mean, I have loved everything I've read by Kristin Hannah. I just think she's a great writer, and I do quite enjoy my historical fiction. What was nice this time is I have not really read anything about Vietnam. Honestly, I don't know a lot about Vietnam, which is really bad. I feel like because at school I studied World War I, World War II, they were sort of the focus. I tend to read books set around that mostly when I read historical fiction. I feel like it's just like I feel like I understand it better. But even though I don't know a lot about Vietnam, I felt like I learned so much about it in this book. Obviously, I acknowledge it's fiction, so maybe not everything is true, but I do feel like Kristin Hannah does draw upon the sort of real types of things that happened at that time. So I feel there was probably a lot of truth in this sort of fictional story. And it actually broke my heart. Like, there were parts I was like crying in this. This is so sad. A little unrealistic in parts of the fiction, in my opinion, I think, but it's historical fiction, not historical. I will say that. We have to know there's a differentiation, but still great. So in this book, we follow Frances. She decides to sign up to the war as a nurse because her brother has gone away in the war and she wants to be with him, basically. She is like, oh no, like, she's missing her brother, so she feels like, yeah, what if I just go out there? However, just before she is sent out, but she has already signed up, they sadly find her brother has been killed, but she has to go anyway. And while she's there, obviously, she sort of grows up very quickly. She's in awful situations. She's seeing bodies with limbs missing, absolutely horrific things. And she's so young and she has to learn to be a very good nurse, very efficient nurse during this, under all this pressure. And she's actually really good at it. There's obviously things that happen while she's out there, but I don't want to give away the whole plot. And then upon returning, she kind of realizes that some people are ashamed of her, that a lot of people don't like the fact that Vietnam's happening. So a lot of sort of war veterans, etc., are getting badly treated. And that's as much as I'm going to say without giving away more of the plot. But honestly, such an emotional read. And Frances, I just love her as a character. She is so strong. There is one part where I think she makes a really sort of dumb decision, but I mean, she's in a very stressful world, life, whatever, so I think I can forgive that. But that did annoy me a little bit. I was like, oh, come on, girl, don't be so naive. But, you know, like I said, different time, and who knows what I would be like if I was living in something like that. It would be horrendous. So if you like your historical fiction and you haven't read this one yet, definitely pick it up. It's emotional. And then I read the second Crescent City. So if you watched last month's wrap up, you'll know I read the first book. So I did get through this massive beefy book and complete part 2 of Crescent City. It ended on not what I was expecting. For those that have read it, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. A certain character appears, and I had heard that there was a crossover with Sarah J. Maas books, but I heard it about a different character. So now I'm a little confused and I can't wait to get into book 3, but I am making sure I read some other books first because I've still got plenty of time until the next ACOTAR to finish Crescent City, and I've got so many books and so many arcs and stuff I'm committed to that I am gonna have a little rest, but love this. I really need to pick up the next one. Obviously can't really talk about the plot here because it is the second book in a series, but I really highly recommend Crescent City. So if you like Sarah J. Maas but you haven't read Crescent City yet, definitely go read it. Even if you haven't read Sarah J. Maas, I would recommend it, but maybe start with her other series first. I do think it's best to either read Throne of Glass or ACOTAR first and have this last. I do think that. And then the next book I picked up was a very sort of vibey for the summer book for sure, which was The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This was the first Christina Lauren book that I've read. I've seen her name everywhere, but my book club, one of them, chose this as our read. And it was a really nice, like, easy read, but very good, very entertaining. I gave it 4 stars because it didn't like necessarily stand out as sort of rom-com novels do for me, but I still very much enjoyed it. Very quick, lovely read. And honestly, I think the reason it didn't stand out for me is the ending just felt a little bit rushed. Like, the resolve was just too easy and too quick, but overall I enjoyed it. We follow 2 characters, Anna and Liam, and they were once married, a marriage of convenience, so that they could get certain student housing, because if you were married you could get like better housing. So they got married but then barely got to know each other, which is a bit weird to me. That's the kind of weird part of the plot where I'm like, are you telling me you really lived together and you knew nothing about each other? I don't know. I feel that's a bit weird. Also, Anna was friends with Liam's brother, and she still doesn't seem to know much about him or his life, which I think is kind of bizarre. But overseeing that part, basically this is set 5 years later, and Liam turns up at Anna's because it turns out they're actually still married, which Anna didn't realise, because he did get her to sign stuff, but she didn't read it, and it basically said that she had to stay married to him for a minimum of 5 years, because it turns out that if he gets married and then divorces before 5 years is up, he's actually going to lose his inheritance, and he comes from a very wealthy, famous family, and he doesn't want to lose all of this money. And the reason he needs her now is his sister's getting married, and the family, of course, want his wife at the wedding, who somehow in 5 years, they still haven't met or questioned it. I mean, you kind of find out they sort of have questioned it, but the fact that he's got away with it for 5 years is a little crazy. So she goes along to this wedding, pretending to be the dutiful wife, and her father has been having some medical issues. She's in a lot of debt with that, and Liam offers to pay her a big sum of money if she'll go along with this lie so that he can get his inheritance. However, as I'm sure you can imagine, they're obviously going to start falling for each other. There's going to be a lot of twists and turns. His family are honestly quite vile. They're very rude, horrible people. And it's a lot of him sort of learning to stand up for himself and grow as a person with sort of Anna's support. And there's a little spice in here too. So I think it's a very entertaining read. Like I said, not stand out for me, but a very good summer read. And if you like your rom-coms, I would still highly recommend it. Then my next read was one I read on my Kindle again, and it was actually Lord of the Flies by William Golding. The reason I read this is I actually got it a little while ago because I knew I wanted to reread it because there's the new Netflix show of Lord of the Flies, but I wanted a reminder of the book because it's been like 20 years since I read that. Maybe even slightly more. I'm not sure. Around 20 years for sure since I read Lord of the Flies. And you know what? It stuck with me. Like, I could remember so much of the book. And I just remember I always resonated with Piggy, I think because I was quite bullied when I was younger, and Piggy, you know, is very targeted and bullied, and he is definitely a symbol of how cruel children can get. And so I used to just really relate to him. But essentially this follows a group of boys who get stranded on an island. I used to love books like were about getting stranded on an island when I was younger. And essentially, obviously, they're trying to survive. And at first they sort of have quite a few things in order. They make rules like they have to hold a conch to be the one to speak and everyone listens to them, to sort of try and create order and sort of survive on this island. But slowly as things go on, you know, order starts to deteriorate and there's a lot of chaos and bad things happen. Essentially, eventually they're trying to get rescued off the island, but at first, I mean, they're boys. I guess they find it quite fun and they sort of take advantage of certain things. And unfortunately, those that are sort of more bullies do really take it out on the weaker characters. And it's a little bit of like a survival of the fittest kind of thing. It shows a lot about humanity. It makes a lot of commentary about humanity. It's actually a very deep book under the surface. So if you haven't read it, I do think it's sort of like almost sort of like that classic status where I would recommend people read it because it has a lot to say, even if it's not always the most fun read at all. I've given it 4 stars because I think I resonated with it even more when I was younger. I do think, like I said, you learn a lot from it. I think it's like an important read, even if it's not always the easiest one. And then my final read of the month was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, which is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia. And it's book 2 in the Nightborn duet specifically. So from what I gather, the Crowns of Nyaxia series is sort of split into different sort of duologies. I don't know if they're all duologies, but they're sort of split into separate sections. So I don't think you have to like necessarily continue. Like the next book isn't going to be such a direct continuation. I think it follows different characters if I want to like continue. I know there is a novella that is set around the time that the original duology is set, so I do think I want to read that. Whether I continue with the whole series or not, I don't know, because I've heard that the original duology is the best one. And I did hear really mixed things about this, but actually I overall really enjoyed this duology. Of course, it is the second book in a series, so I can't talk about it too much, but the first book, it's a little bit like Hunger Games versus, I don't know, Twilight. It's like vampires, but with a sort of game scenario, and it's got a bit of civil war going on. And yeah, this is the continuation, so I can't obviously talk about exactly what happens in the plot. What I will say is the reason I gave it 4.5 and not higher is I did have a little bit of an issue with the ending. I just think it was a little bit too quick and easy again. I feel like there should have been a lot more to the sort of final battle, which you often get in these types of books. But that's as much as I can really say without giving things away. But I think if you like your kind of like trial-based books, this is a good series to get into. Obviously the second book isn't trials again, but the first book very much is, and then this is the continuation. And I thought there's some very interesting things happen in this book. So overall, really enjoyed the duology, and as I said, I'm probably going to pick up the novella and read that. Will I continue the series? I don't know. If you've read more of the Crowns of Nyaxia novels, let me know. Is it worth me carrying on? Please let me know if you know. If not, I'll figure it out for myself sometime soon. But right now, you know, I'm on my book buying ban. So anything I don't already own, I do already have the novella. So I could go and read that, but I can't go and buy like the next proper book. But yeah, that is everything I read for the month. And as you can see, overall a very good month. I feel like I read some very long books. There was a couple that are a little bit shorter and easier, but I do feel like I got through a lot of pages this month and I feel very good for it. And I don't think I've read anything that I hated. I enjoyed everything. I mean, I think To All the Boys I Loved Before is my lowest rating, and that's more just because it's not as relatable for me now, but I can still tell that for like a YA book, is something I would have loved, and it is good in its own right. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed seeing what I have read this month. Let me know what your favorite read for the month was, you know, things that I can add to my growing TLBR one day when I'm not on this book buying ban anymore. And I'm now gonna love you and leave you because it is boiling in here and I can feel myself getting progressively hotter and hotter as I film this video. So yeah, I'm gonna say thank you for watching and I hope I see you again real soon. Bye!